Integrating Tagiriron, returning to harmony. Every human being develops an identity. Through family, through culture, through success, through failure, through praise, through rejection. These experiences gradually shape the story we tell about who we are. Identity itself is not the problem. It allows us to participate in the world, relate to others, and express ourselves as unique individuals. The difficulty begins when we forget that identity is something we experience, not something we are. Some abandon themselves in order to be accepted. Others become imprisoned by the image they have created. Though these expressions appear opposite, they arise from the same fragmentation. One hides the authentic self, the other protects the constructed self. Neither fully embodies Tiferet. Integration begins when we no longer seek identity through approval or performance. Instead, we begin living from authenticity. The heart no longer asks, "Who must I become?" It quietly remembers, "Who have I always been?" This is the restoration of Tiferet, not the absence of identity, but identity brought into harmony with truth. Healing repression. When authenticity has been suppressed, the individual gradually forgets their own voice. The opinions of others become more important than their own inner knowing. Approval becomes safety, conflict becomes something to avoid. The individual slowly shapes themselves according to expectation rather than authenticity. Yet the authentic self never disappears. It patiently waits beneath every role that has been learned. Healing begins by giving yourself permission to exist honestly, not perfectly, honestly. Practices. Notice the moments when you automatically agree despite feeling differently. Practice expressing small preferences without apology. Choose authenticity over approval in one situation each day. Spend time alone without performing for anyone. Journal about the question, "What genuinely brings me alive?" Pay attention to the parts of yourself you have hidden to belong. Rather than judging them, gently welcome them home. Authenticity grows through expression, not performance. Healing possession. When identity becomes possessed, the individual begins protecting the image they have created. Recognition becomes addictive. Criticism feels threatening. Success becomes necessary. Failure becomes unbearable. The self becomes something to constantly maintain. Yet no image can ever contain the fullness of who we are. Healing begins by loosening our attachment to the story we continually tell about ourselves, not by destroying identity, but by allowing it to become flexible, honest, and alive. Practices. Practice admitting when you do not know. Allow yourself to make mistakes without immediately defending them. Spend time doing things in which you are not seeking recognition. Notice the impulse to impress, explain, or protect your image. Rather than following it, become curious. Ask yourself, what am I afraid would happen if I simply allowed myself to be seen as I am? Practice receiving both praise and criticism without allowing either to define you. Your identity becomes healthier whenever it becomes less rigid. Integration. As both extremes gradually soften, identity begins returning to harmony. The authentic self gradually emerges, not because it has been created, but because it has finally been allowed to breathe. Approval becomes appreciated rather than required. Criticism becomes information rather than condemnation. Success becomes meaningful rather than defining. Failure becomes learning rather than identity. The heart no longer seeks completion through image. It finds peace through authenticity. There is less effort, less performance, less defense, more honesty, more openness, more presence. This is the return of Tiferet. The heart no longer divides itself between who it is and who it believes it should be. It simply expresses itself with sincerity. Harmony is restored. Recognition, as Tagiriron begins to integrate, subtle changes naturally appear. You become less concerned with how you are perceived. You become more comfortable admitting uncertainty. Comparison gradually loses its influence. You no longer feel compelled to prove your worth. You become increasingly willing to be authentic even when authenticity feels vulnerable. Praise becomes enjoyable without becoming necessary. Criticism becomes easier to receive without becoming personal. Your identity becomes more spacious, more flexible, more genuine. You begin living from your heart rather than protecting an image of yourself. These are signs that Tiferet is becoming embodied. Living expression. As Tiferet becomes integrated, authenticity naturally begins expressing itself through every aspect of life. Relationships deepen because people encounter the real you rather than a carefully maintained image. Leadership becomes grounded in integrity rather than reputation. Creativity becomes freer because it is no longer seeking approval. Service becomes more genuine because it is no longer motivated by recognition. Humility and confidence begin existing together. You no longer need to diminish yourself, neither do you need to elevate yourself. You simply become willing to be fully present as you are. The heart naturally becomes a place of balance. Strength and compassion coexist. Wisdom and humility coexist. Individuality and unity coexist. This is the living expression of Tiferet, not perfection, harmony. Reflection. Take a quiet moment to reflect upon your identity. Ask yourself, which expression of Tigirion has shaped my life more deeply, repression or possession? Which practice speaks most directly to where I am today? Where have I sacrificed authenticity for acceptance? What image am I still protecting? Who am I when no role needs to be performed? What would it feel like to be completely honest with myself? How can I allow my heart to express itself more freely today? The heart was never meant to become a stage. It was meant to become a home. Every act of authenticity is an act of remembrance. Every act of remembrance restores harmony.